button. I think we're live. This is awesome. Well, this is our first live tasting. Welcome. Behind me is our office in Seattle. If you're tuning in from somewhere far away, leave a message. I'm actually able to see the stream right over here, so if you have a message or a question, you can ask that, and hopefully I'll answer it. And gosh, here we are. So thanks so much for joining us, picking up the wines if you managed to get them from Wine Awesomeness. If you didn't, I'm hoping you found some alternative wines that are probably excellent and delicious also. If you asked me some questions, I did get a few emails. Thanks for asking. I hope you found those wines just fine too. Okay, so here's the scene. We have the most important tool. This is a wine glass. I have your three wines. The first wine we'll be tasting tonight is the Natural Condition Albarino. This is from Rioja Baja region. It's a white wine appellation. Very interesting region. I know most Albarino wines come from Rias Baixas, but this one is super fun, and I'm so excited for you to try it. This is a Nero Diavola from Sicily. And, you know, while we're here, we'll want to decant this in just a minute. Because it does need a little bit of decanting. It's got a little bit of funkiness. And then finally, the third wine of the tasting is the Zinfandel. So, and then, of course, since you'll be tasting along with the book, I hope you got your book handy, and I'll tell you what page numbers we need to jump to at a point in the tasting. I also have a glass of water for clearing the palate, and a spittoon. Thank you, Mom. All right, so that's pretty much it. Thanks so much for joining us, and let's get this decanted. The benefits of decanting, besides the fact that it looks really beautiful in a decanter, introducing oxygen to wine after it's been in a bottle for a long time really helps open up and release some of the sulfur fixing that happens in the wine. It's not sulfites, it's just when the wine can't bind to oxygen, it binds to sulfur compounds and they can get a little stinky. This guy's got a little bit of it. I opened it a little earlier and gave it a sniff. And once we decant it, it'll taste super great. Okay, so I want to make one quick note before getting started. Oh, I forgot one last thing. If you did bring a notepad, or if you're taking notes on your computer, super awesome. I want to show you some tricks on taking notes, because if you are an experienced wine drinker, you know you won't forget. You won't remember. You will forget everything. So, pour a quick taste of the Albarino. I do about 3-ounce pour. That's pretty much perfect. You'll want to make sure that you write down your aroma notes before tasting it, because your mouth will trick you into thinking you're smelling different things. So make sure you write down your aroma notes first. So what I really want to get into is, what is wine? This stuff, this amazing product that we get so obsessed about. You know, wine is a cultural heritage that has been around for thousands and thousands of years, and it's been passed down and changed and modified over many different cultures all over the world, from China to Georgia to Greece to Spain to the United States to Argentina to Chile to Australia. It's everywhere. And the amazing thing about wine is there's so many different kinds, and if you're drinking a quality wine such as these, they are going to taste different. And the secret of it all is, when you're observing wine, you're observing it with your nose and your mouth. And there is really an art to that. I really think wine is an art. And because it is an art, it's also very subjective. And a lot of people have a lot of opinions on what good wine is and what bad wine is. But I'll tell you the truth, that if you taste a quality wine and you don't like it, it might just be because you don't like it, and that's fine. I happen to like all wines, but it's my job to like wine, so I think I'm very, very lucky. And besides that, what really is wine, if you want to get down to the nitty gritty, is if you turn to page 4 and 5 in the book. I could use a handy cam right about now. If you turn to page 4 and 5 of the book, we're talking about what is wine. Well, it's mostly water, as you can see here with this nice little guy right here. And then it's got some alcohol in it, and that's ethanol alcohol. That's what makes us drunk. It's super awesome. And then we have other stuff. This other stuff right here, this is the magic of wine, really. This is how we get all the flavor in wine. There's a lot of acid in wine. The primary acids in wine are tartaric and malic acid. There is amino acids, esters, minerals, iron, magnesium. These are some of the common minerals in wine. Phenols. Phenols provide the color of wine, so that red, beautiful red color you get in a glass of red wine. Phenols, tannin, that bitterness you get in wine, that's from phenols. Then there's things like sugar. Some wines have residual sugar, a very small amount, can make a wine very sweet. Glycerol, which is this sort of magical, misunderstood thing that provides some texture to wine. And finally, sugar alcohol and sulfites. The maximum amount of sulfites allowed in wine is 350 parts per million, which is the same as a glass of Coke. So yeah, we can switch back. so that's what's in wine, and that's what's in this glass. So before we really get into tasting this wine, and it smells pretty good, I want to talk about what we're looking at when we're doing the 4-step method. Look tells you a little bit about wine, but not too much. It's one of the things that maybe it's not super important. In fact, one of the great things you can do if you're really trying to train your nose is to completely blindfold yourself. And then we'll swirl it, and I want to show you a trick on how to swirl, and then we'll give it a sniff, and finally we'll taste it, and then we can conclude. So first I want to show you, if you turn to page 56 of the book, that's the Albarino page, and I'm just going to hold this glass over the page so you can see it here, so you can see the color of this wine. It's not going to be perfect on broadcast, I understand, but this is a pretty golden colored Albarino, and the reason it's so gold is because it's a 2012 vintage wine. You know, white wines, as they age, they increase in intensity and color, they darken. You know, a older Chardonnay will be a richer gold color. If I was to describe this color, I would say it is a medium gold with light platinum fleck. It's day bright, star bright, not super duper bright. It's a little bit reduced in color. It feels almost like the color is flattened out, and I can tell because the color it's not so shimmery, that the color is from age on this wine. And I know it's 2012, so it's not super old, but for a white wine, that's pretty aged. And so you can see this produces wine legs or wine tears. You know, a lot of people think the quality comes from tears in wine, and that's not exactly true. It's the tears in wine are from the level of alcohol. Wine tears are a phenomenon called the Marangoni effect, and what happens is, as the wine is on the side of the glass, the alcohol evaporates quickly, causing tears to appear on the glass and pull down. So the higher the alcohol, the thicker and more intense the tears will be as they flow down the side of the glass. So that's a cool little trick for you. All right, so we've taken a good look at this wine. It looks really beautiful. Let's give it a sniff. Now, some wine experts won't actually swirl the wine before giving it their first sniff. They do that because they just want to give it a quick intensity check. How tough is this wine without swirling it? You don't have to do this. I like to give it a good swirl, and if you are uncomfortable swirling, I want to show you a really cool trick. Take your 2 fingers, put them on the base of the glass, and on the table, draw little circles with your glass, and you'll find that you make a beautiful wine swirl, and you can practice swirling like this. When you get good, you can pick it up and do it in the air. So there you go. That's how you can swirl. When you swirl, now the reason we swirl is we really want to release all those amazing aroma compounds into the bell of the glass. And that's why I have so much room in this glass, is because the more aroma compounds collect in this air, and then they will collect into my nose when I give them a sniff. So you want to give this a good swirl, and then a sniff. And I want to show you, if you want to give a close-up cam, I want to show you this trick. When you smell wine, you know, everybody has a different sense of ability of smell. Some people have a very subdued sense of smell. Some people have a very strong sense of smell. So depending on how far you are from the glass, that's going to be your own ability to smell. You know, if you smell wine and it only smells like wine, well, that actually might be because you're very sensitive. And so when you put your nose in the glass, it's too strong. So try moving back a little bit, and you might find you can pick up more fruit flavors that way. Another great trick to know is when I'm sniffing wine, sometimes I'll smell down here, and I get a lot more of the fruit flavors and the richer, more intense flavors in the wine. And when I smell at the top of the glass, up here, I get a lot more of the delicate, sort of aromatic, minerally, floral flavors of the wine, and you also get some of the wine faults up there in this top side of the glass. All right, so that's a great trick. All right, so we're going to give this guy a sniff. And if you're on page 56 and you can't think of flavors, you're welcome to use the flavor charts there. But the first thing I try to do is I just close my eyes and I think to myself, what am I smelling? I just completely remove the fact that this is wine in my glass, and I pretend that I'm not smelling wine at all. And then I think about what it is that I'm actually smelling. And this is going to get you the first, most obvious smells in the wine. And you should just, as soon as you smell them, write them down. So if you want to take a sniff, write down the flavors, and maybe if you can do 3 fruit flavors and 3 other flavors, that would be great. And then we'll compare. So in this wine, I get quite a bit of green honeydew melon. I get lemon, grapefruit. I also get this funky, almost minerally note. It's almost like smelling wet, salty rocks at the beach or something like that. It has this very sort of salty, dried rock quality. Definitely. All right, so now we've given this guy a really good sniff, and you've probably taken notes, I'm hoping. I have my notes here. I took them earlier. Let's compare. I get ripe honeydew lime zest. Did anybody get lime zest? And I think it's time to taste. I'll show you a little bit of how to taste, but so when you take your first taste, get a pretty medium to large amount in your mouth, but not too much that's too full. And what I usually do is I let in a little bit of air, and it sounds funny, but it works great. You really want to put in as much I have this funny way of sucking in air, and I think everybody has their own way of doing it. The reason why it's so cool to do that is because you smell in the back side of your nose. So if you are tasting a wine, then Could we see some, what? All right. If you're tasting a wine and you're only tasting from the front of your mouth, you're going to miss out on all the potential flavors that come through the back side of your mouth. And a friend of mine once told me that taste kind of happens in the front, in the middle, and the back of your palate. So you'll taste something in the front, you'll taste sweetness, you'll taste some ripe fruit flavors. In the middle, you'll get a lot more texture on your palate. And then in the back, you'll actually get these really interesting sort of more spice or floral aromas that start to happen towards the back of your mouth with your retronasal passage. Okay. Wow. We're getting some really great comments on this wine. This is awesome. Hi from Laguna Beach. All right, so some people are getting a note of circus peanuts and orange marshmallows. Wow. I got peach flavor, pear and peach, cantaloupe. Yeah, definitely. White peach for sure. Pineapple. That's great. You don't have to spit if you don't want to. So, with this wine, when we taste it, you'll notice it tastes a lot different than how it smells. We're getting a ton of fruit flavors. And when you put it in your mouth, you're getting, bam, so much acidity, a lack of sweetness, and the palate has this incredible minerally sort of textural quality in the middle of your palate. You can kind of feel it gritting on your tongue to the roof of your mouth. And I would say this wine is a bit salty. It's got quite a bit of a saline note to it. So this is an interesting wine. And the taste, when we're thinking about taste, we're actually thinking about exactly those things. Is it sweet? Is it sour? Does it have bitterness? How big is the body? You're not as focused on the flavors of like lemon or cantaloupe or those types of things. You're interested in sort of the textural taste qualities of the wine. So that's why we do a lot of the aroma tasting notes first, and then the textural tasting notes later. It will help you sort of dissect the different aspects of wine. I'm just going to take one more sip. And when I do taste, I take a big swish, and I do swallow just a little bit to feel the alcohol on the back of my throat. When you can look at this wine, it says it's 12.5%. I actually think it might be a little bit higher than that, just based on the intensity I can feel in the back of my throat. And you can get pretty good with practice identifying the alcohol level. If I had to guess, this might be like 12.8, 12.9, maybe 13%. All right, so besides the textural taste of this wine, there is one last facet of tasting that's worth paying attention to. And I think a lot of wine critics agree that this is sort of what separates a good wine or average wine from a great wine, and that is the length of the flavor. From the moment you put it in your mouth, as it changes, to finally when the taste leaves your palate, is the length of the wine. And you can sit there and count it out. How long is that taste? And you'll start to notice that some wines have a longer palate than others. I've called wines a cliff edge wine if they just stop happening and you just need another sip. So that is this wine, because of the acidity and how much it has this textural quality on the roof of my mouth that persists, I would say that it has a pretty long flavor, which is actually pretty common for a variety like this, Albarino, with high acidity. Riesling is another great example of a varietal similar to this with a really long taste. Although very, very light, but it definitely continues to persist. And because it has such a long flavor, it makes it a great wine as a palate cleanser wine, because it will keep pushing on through. So you could have some food, some maybe richer, creamier food with this. I'm thinking seafood would go really well with this. And then drink the wine, and it would kind of cut through all of that. So some of these, I've received questions about wine in the past, like where do all these wine flavors actually come from? Like, why am I smelling grapefruit? Why am I smelling melon, white peach? What is going on? This is a glass of wine that doesn't make any sense. Well, the truth is, and the funny thing is, if you were to actually take an Albarino grape and smell it, it would smell nothing like what this wine smells like. In fact, the process of fermentation, as the grape juice gets converted into alcohol, is where the aroma compounds are produced. And they're naturally occurring aroma compounds, and there's hundreds of them. And different types of wine exhibit different aroma compounds at different rates. And for example, this wine has two classes of aroma compounds really showing through in a strong way, and those are thiols. Thiols can be either very earthy in a red wine, or in a white wine such as this, taste kind of like grapefruit pith, or a melon note, like a green melon note. And then the other class that I'm really getting a very strong aroma from is from terpenes. Now, terpenes will put out smells like citrus aromas, lime, lemon. In fact, there's an aroma called limonene, which is literally the smell of lemons. And because the grapes interact with the yeast, they create these aroma compounds, and they are identical to the limonene in lemon. So it's pretty cool. We aren't putting lemons in wine, but there is limonene in this wine. So that's pretty amazing. I hope you enjoyed wine number 1. You should definitely let me know. Someone got citrusy pickle, like chewing a grapefruit seed. I love it. So true. This wine has a lot of bitterness on the palate. You get this sort of like, oh my god, like grapefruit pith, that like white part of the grapefruit. And the bitterness, these are the phenols in the wine. This wine was pressed off, but they could have pressed it a little hard, and they could have squeezed those skins pretty firmly. And this wine in general is going to produce, or it could be a little less ripe grapes that they're picking. So they're going to have a lot more phenol, like less ripe seeds getting pressed, and they'll produce a lot of this bitterness. Now, as much as the bitterness might be gross to you, it's actually pretty lovely when you find out that bitterness is one of the most, incredible healthy things in your life. Not that wine's that great for you, but whenever I get a bitter wine, I'm like, it's good for me. Those of you who are highly sensitive to the bitter flavor in this wine, because it's not super prevalent, if you're really like, oh my god, it's so bitter, you might actually have a super palate. That's somebody who's highly sensitive to bitter flavors. You probably don't like IPA beers. You probably don't like bitter vegetables. You might be a little sensitive to broccoli or what are those little Brussels sprouts? There's actually a test in the book on page 19. I could totally get a handy cam right about now. And you can look at what type of sensitivities there are and test your own palate. They really associate a strong palate with a lot of these taste receptors on your tongue. So that is pretty much the tasting program, and I thought we would try this out with Albarino and move on to Nero Diavolo, which is next. If you would like to, turn to page 144. That is the Nero Diavolo page, and I'm going to rinse my glass. You can rinse your glass with water. I'm going to rinse my glass with a little wine because I'm spoiled. This wine is definitely bone dry. I totally agree. Some for the camera guy. All right. Wine number 2, Nero Diavola. This is a very interesting grape that grows very, very dominantly in Sicily and nowhere else. Well, hardly anywhere else. And it's interesting to me because you can find this wine so affordably, but it has so many analogs to Cabernet Sauvignon. It makes it a great alternative to a wine that's usually pretty expensive. This wine, production-wise, has a lot less oak than you'll see on a lot of Nero Diavolas. You'll tend to find them a bit richer than this, which is why I put this on wine number 2 in the tasting. Otherwise, I think it's a full-bodied wine and it should go maybe after the Zin, but I think you'll find out pretty soon that the Zin is quite strong. So let's take a look at this wine with the handy cam. Look at that color. You know, I don't know if you can see this, but I can. The color of this wine is definitely a bit violet. It's interesting thing about the color in red wine is that the bluer the wine is, the less acidity it may have, slightly less acidity, and the redder it is, the more acidity it has. So if you see, if towards the edge here, the edge of the glass, it's sort of tinged a little bit purple or blue versus red, that might help you have an indication as to the acidity level. This wine normally does have a fair amount of acidity, so I expect it to have a fair amount of acidity, as you can sort of see here on the taste profile. And it has this, it is relatively translucent, which to me is going to indicate that it probably wasn't oaked for too long, which is absolutely the truth. And that's probably going to be, it's going to be a lot lighter in texture. I'll expect that from this wine, if you can see with the color. And finally, the last thing we check is the legs. I still haven't been able to make that work for me. On this wine, I would say it's pretty similar to the Albarino we just tasted. Maybe a little bit more. No, it's pretty fast moving. Might even be a touch lighter than the Albarino. It says it's 13% ABV. I could agree with that. Sounds good to me. Let's give it a swirl and a sniff. Wow, this wine is bold. It really jumps out of the glass. I don't even have to swirl it. It's just very, very bold. In fact, if you're sensitive, you might actually hold your nose a little bit farther away so you can collect the aromas. Oh God, this guy's big. He's got a lot of aromas. Okay, black cherry. Who's got black cherry? This is like a black cherry bomb. It is so big. Oh my gosh. Okay. All right, I'm going to get over black cherry. If you get stuck, if you get overwhelmed with like aromas, a lot of times I'll sniff my arm to sort of cancel out my own, it's like my own personal flavor. Thank you. So that I can smell the wine again, and that totally worked. Okay. All right, so now I've got the black cherry, and I moved past it in my mind, and now I'm getting some really interesting licorice, sort of anise, like star anise kind of notes to it, and then this funky, almost herbal minty quality. I wonder if anybody else is getting that. Blackberry patch with thorn, love it. Sage and rosemary, yeah. Oh, I'm loving these calls. Yeah, definitely like a little bit of that sort of dried desert sage. Ooh, yeah, for sure. There is something that smells to me like very tart. Like, it is black cherry, but then like somebody's hiding some sour cherries in the background. They're like, yeah, you want some black cherry? And they're like, actually, here you go. I like, it smells tart. All right, so if you're taking notes, you're awesome. I took some notes. I'll read them off to you. All right. I seem to think it's clear, medium intensity tears. It has bold intensity aromas, black cherry, anise, blackberry. I got this funny spicy note when I first opened it. It's a weird, and you have to smell them. You just go to the cabinet, find your red chili flakes, and give them a whiff. There's something very red chili about this wine, and that's odd. There's like a weird, like a dried chili spice to this, and that I definitely got that on the aroma. And let's give it a taste. Someone's got mushroom. I love it. Mushroom, a lot of times when I smell mushroom, that is actually from the fermentation process that you'll get mushroom aromas. So it's actually a secondary aroma, sometimes not associated so much with the grape, but fermented, associated with the yeast and the process of fermentation. I like that call. Good call, mushroom. I wonder if they decanted. Julie, did you decant? Mm-hmm. Holy smokes. I could gleek like 5 feet. Wow. This sucker's got some acidity, for sure. For a red wine like this from Sicily, this is, wow, they're doing a good job preserving acidity. All right, on the palate, what do we get? All that acidity makes the body of this wine so much lighter. And this is interesting because, wine from Sicily, we expect to be a lot bolder and more rich and more intense because it is from such a hot climate. But I'm betting that the winemaker is getting grapes that for some reason aren't getting as ripe as they would down in the lower elevation vineyards of Sicily. Sicily is a mountain island, and it's a volcano island, literally. And the location of where these grapes are from, if you want to look in your book to Italy, they're kind of in the center of Sicily down here, and it's pretty high elevation. You get a lot colder nights. There's some winds that come in there, and I'm betting that this is a very hot climate grape. I'm betting that this vintage was a little bit cooler. They were able to pick a little bit cooler in producing wine with such high acidity. Yeah, I would agree. So let's talk about, this is a great question. How would we differentiate between the mouthfeel of acid versus tannins? Great question, because right now there's a lot of tannin going on in my mouth too, but I'm able to identify beyond that tannin that there's also acidity. Tannin, if you can imagine for a minute a wet tea bag on your tongue, that is like 100% pure tannin. What it does, it has a very drying and astringent quality. So the saliva in your tongue will dry out. It will just like completely pull the moisture out of your tongue. And the fascinating thing that's happening is tannin actually scrapes the proteins off your tongue. You salivate, and what tannin does, it'll actually scrape those proteins off of your tongue, which is why it causes that drying effect. Now, acidity is quite the opposite activity. When you taste acidity, your mouth actually starts to water, kind of like I'm about to bite into an apple. You start to produce these more, you could gleek, you start to salivate. These are signs of acidity. You're also going to feel the acidity sort of, this is just me. I'm not sure if it's me or but I tend to feel the acidity towards the front of my mouth, whereas I feel the intensity of tannin sort of in the middle of my mouth when my tongue hits the roof of my mouth. Some tannins will actually be towards the front, like they'll literally make your mouth, your like lips stick to your teeth in the front. But so tannin sticks you together, and acidity makes you a lot more moist. I like the call about chewing tobacco. This wine definitely has some funky tobacco notes. Mentholated cherries. This is exactly what this wine is. You know what's incredible about this Nero d'Avola is in the past few years, this region has been producing a lot of Nero d'Avola, making a lot of oaked wines. This wine actually has a lot less oak on it, which is why I think it's so light and delicate, where it would normally be so much more rich. You do still have quite a lot of tannin. I would say this is medium, maybe medium plus tannin. I would say the fruit is definitely bold, and the acidity is maybe medium high to maybe even high. Tannin in the middle and acids on the sides. Right on, Michael. Mike Z wants to know what gleeking is. Alright, apparently you weren't tortured in elementary school. But gleeking is when you have these salivary glands into your tongue, and when you have something super acidic, you can shoot out. I don't want to do it here. I can do it really well, but I'm not going to do it. Gleeking is something I learned in elementary school, and it's going to be with me for the rest of my life now. It's going to haunt me. Alright, Nero d'Avola. Opinions on this wine. I wonder what people are thinking. Definitely put in your comments on what do you think of light-styled Nero d'Avola from Sicily. All right, next wine. We're doing good. Next wine, Zinfandel. If you turn to page 128, listed as a medium-bodied wine, but this sucker is pretty big. And I have a secret as to why, but I'll let you in on that secret in a little bit. Zinfandel, aka Primitivo. It's the same grape. It's a Croatian grape variety, also known as Tribedrag. Grows primarily in the United States.
What would you pair with the last wine?
This last wine. What would I pair with it? Just before we get into this, let's talk about pairings with this wine. You know, because of the lighter quality of this wine, I would want to do something chickeny. I'm feeling chicken. I'm feeling almost like, but because of the great acidity, I really want to play around with some more spice flavors. Maybe like not too spicy Indian dish with something with sauce. We need something with like sort of a rich, creamier sauce, not with cream based, but like a thicker sauce. So if you were doing any kind of chicken in a mushroom sauce, that would be probably amazing. That would be amazing with that wine, because the mushrooms and the richness of the sauce, you know, if it's a broth-based sauce with chicken, this wine would cut right through it, and it would probably taste fruitier with the chicken. Need something beefy and juicy. Oh, I like the idea of red curry. That sounds awesome. All right, so moving along, Zinfandel. Some for the camera guy. All right, look at this guy. What? Well, let's take a look at this guy. Can I do a handy cam? All right, this Zinfandel. You know what I love about Zinfandel? for as big and high and bold and high alcohol as it can be, it is never that bold in color. It always is just a little bit light and see-through. I don't know if you can tell, but this is a pretty translucent wine. This wine is a little less violet than than the Nero d'Avola. I would say it is a ruby violet in color. Not too much differentiation between the middle of the wine to the edge of the wine, which makes me think it's pretty young, which is true. It's a 2013 vintage, so we can know that about it. One of the things that happens with red wines like this, as they age, they will tend to tinge a little bit orange, a little bit more orange on the edges. And I feel like this wine just has a touch of that going on, just a couple years old. But it makes me believe that although this wine is outstanding right now, probably it's already showing signs of the anthocyanins starting to degrade. And when the tannins and when the anthocyanins start to go, the tannins start to go, this wine is telling me maybe it's not going to last as long. I'm not sure, but I'm not sure just yet. We'll have to give it a taste and find out. All right, so that's that. And Zinfandel is probably one of the least respected grape varieties in the bunch. And we can blame white Zinfandel for this because it's this sweet kind of cheap wine that you get. But red Zinfandel, white Zinfandel is made with the same grape as red Zinfandel. But red Zinfandel is actually when they let this wine sing, and it can be very, very beautiful. Color is magenta, more of a muted ruby. I like these kind of content. We decanted our St. Francis Zinfandel 2011. Ooh, that sounds good. Yeah. So we have one question about tannins and pairing before I move fully onto the Zinfandel. And I would say that it's about high tannin wine with food. Now, you could actually pair a pretty high tannin wine with food as a palate cleanser. The one issue that I kind of have with that is that high tannin, when you're choosing the wine based on its high tannin as a palate cleanser, you might actually be missing out some of the fruit of the wine. So when you taste the wine as a palate cleanser, you're suddenly only getting the tannin in the wine, which might not make it taste as good. One of the best things to taste with a high tannin wine, in my opinion, is something very fatty, creamy, and rich. Great example, triple cream brie cheese with a big tannic Cabernet Sauvignon. When you put the two together, it will taste like blueberry ice cream. It's crazy. And the reason for that is the tannins and the fat kind of cancel each other out, and all you're left with is this wonderful fruit flavor, this residual fruit flavor in the wine. So when I do high tannin wines, I always try to match with something with a bit of fat in it, because I want to make sure that the wine, the rest of the wine, the fruit of the wine comes through, and that the tannin is kind of canceled out. Because let's be honest here, a lot of people don't like highly bitter wines. A lot of people are very sensitive to bitter, and tannin has a lot of bitterness and astringency. So moving on, Zinfandel. I would say this wine has pretty bold intensity on the nose. It really jumps out of the glass. I can smell it pretty far from the glass. I can smell many, many flavors. And this might be one of those times when I take my time smelling the wine at different distances to try to collect different flavors. Because towards the top of the wine, I get a lot more of those herbal aromas in this wine, whereas in the bottom of the wine, I get a lot more of that dried kind of pruny fruit. And then if I pull back, I start to get all of the classic smells in Zinfandel, those rich red fruit flavors, the sweet raspberry, strawberry, some 5 spice powder, And when I kind of get in there, definitely peach preserves. I wonder how many people might be getting something like chocolate on the aroma. Like a Tootsie Roll kind of chocolate. All right, I want to give you a chance to write down your notes and your smell notes. If you're finding it difficult, remember you can cancel your nose out and give it another whiff. Try to shoot for, if you can, 3 fruit flavors and 3 other flavors that you get in this wine. I would agree. I got a comment from Henry that there is an herbal flavor sort of at the top of this wine. And he called out sage, and I'm kind of on board with the sage call. That is right on. Right on. So, Zinfandel, let's compare our aroma notes. Is raspberry the most predominant flavor? I really think it is in this particular wine. It's just like, bam, raspberry sauce. And then I really get a very maybe plum, like 5-spice plum, you know, that like Chinese plum sauce? There's definitely something spiced about this wine. And finally, the finished flavors are this sort of funky, sort of dried fruit or a Tootsie Roll Pop kind of note. And those subtle herbal notes of almost like a sage or tobacco. It's very dried. And I like whoever's calling salami. You're totally on. Oh, he says lunch meat. I don't know what kind of lunch meat you're getting. That's probably amazing lunch meat. All right, let's give it a taste. Oh, wow. Intense. Interesting. This is a big guy. This is a big, bold wine. And I have a little bit of a secret. It's not 100% Zinfandel. It's actually got 14% Petit Syrah in it. And I think that's what gets it a little bit over the mark of medium-bodied wine into full-bodied red wine. You know, this is to me, this tastes like classic Zin, but if you were a stickler, you might be able to pick out the Petit Syrah being used in this wine to really richen the flavor and add some tannin, add some of those more dark fruit flavors. This guy is raspberry. It's got a tart flavor. I get this funky sort of brambly blackberry on the finish. I get some of that 5-spice powder. I get some tannin on the front of my teeth, making my lips stick to my teeth a bit. So I know that it's probably got medium plus tannins. The acidity to me seems maybe a little too high for how fruity this wine is. It really smells like ripe fruits, but then on the palate it really has a pretty high acidity, and I have a somewhat sneaking suspicion they allow acidification in the U.S., and there's a possibility they might have used acidification on this wine, not too much, No, it's just citric acid or tartaric acid that they'll add to the wine in the barrel. You know, it's in the barrel. It's not going to affect you or hurt you at all. But sometimes when you get a wine that smells so sweet and fruity and then also has so much acidity, that might be a case of acidification. It's legal in the U.S. and it's not legal in Europe. But conversely, if you're in France, it's legal to add sugar to wine to make the wine have the high enough alcohol level. And chaptalization, adding sugar to wine, is illegal in the U.S. So there's rules and laws for everything, and you can hate, additives in wines, but they do happen. It's pretty common, especially at wines at this level, and just be aware. This is part of what winemaking is, that to create the balance. So all right, we're talking about wow. Acid creeps up later. All right, someone asked a little bit about citric acid. My mistake. It's usually tartaric acid that may get added to wine. Tartaric is the acid that is in wine, and when they add tartaric acid into wine, I'm not verifiably certain, but it's typically a powder, and tartaric acid is made from winemaking processes, so it's basically acids from winemaking that are actually happening. Okay. So I had one person ask about oak and how oak affects wine, and this is a great question. And our wine actually has a bit of oak in it too. And when you get those vanilla notes in wine, or that cola finish on a great Pinot Noir, you're tasting the effect of oak on a wine. Now, normal oak barrels, will be produced and then toasted, usually with a fire. They'll do it over a fire, and toasting it is literally charring the barrel. And then wine goes into this newly charred barrel. Now, this sounds really weird, but because oak, with the charring added, causes aroma compounds, causes chemical reactions to occur. And then as the oak, almost like a tea, the oak seasons the wine. And over time, the longer you're exposing your wine to oak, the more of the seasoning goes into it. The more just like a tea bag, the newer the tea bag is, the more it will flavor the wine. The older the tea bag, the less it will flavor. So if you use your tea bag a couple of times, it's not going to be as intense. So this wine, the oak, not only does it add a creamy, rich flavor of this vanilla, of clove, of cola to a wine, but it does another thing. As the wine sits in the barrel, this magical thing called evaporation happens in between the lining of the barrel and the outside. Oak breathes. It's a natural substance, and it breathes a little bit of oxygen, and some of the wine evaporates out of the barrel, and just through the staves of the barrel. This is called the angel's share. It could be like 2.5 to up to like 3% in a very, very dry region. And this is just what happens. And what that does, though, is as the water evaporates from the wine, it becomes more alcoholic. So the wine gets kind of 2 bumps up for boldness when it sits in an oak barrel. It gets the boldness from all those compounds, the tannin that oak barrel adds, the vanillin, that flavor of vanilla, clove, cola that an oak barrel adds, and then it also gets the added benefit of richening up a little bit, getting a little bit of oxygen exposure to reduce the intensity of the acidity in the wine, and basically, as they say, it smooths it out. So oak can be a pretty fascinating tool with wine. A few people are asking about the difference between French and American oak and what that really is all about. I would say, there are two different species of oak trees, and the primary difference has to do with the density of the oak, of the actual wood. When you have a more porous wood, it's going to flavor the wine more than a less porous wood. French oak happens to be less porous than most American oak. American oak tends to be more porous, and because of that, the American oak will season a wine a lot more than French oak. Now, in terms of difference of flavor, there's a lot of people saying that, American oak puts more coconut or dill flavors in wine, and French oak does more clove and vanilla. Over time you'll notice, yes, that's sort of true, but there are sometimes and occasions where American oak's used and it still puts vanilla and clove notes in a wine. So while that is mainly the truth, and you mainly find that American oak does coconut and sort of sometimes even almost like dill, and it will also sometimes do vanilla flavors. So that would be the primary distance, is the flavoring. So let's get back to this Zinfandel wine and talk a little bit about the flavor. This wine's big. This wine's got really intense alcohol, which again is going to add to the body of the wine. And it has, I can feel it. I'm not even swallowing, so I bet you're feeling it too. It really puts out a lot of those fruit flavors, and even as it changes in my glass, I get more of those dried tobacco notes coming in, which is why I think this wine is great now, but it might not last a long time. As a wine sits open in your bottle, you're tasting it, the aroma compounds are changing literally as the seconds go by. And this wine is changing, and I bet if we taste through the other wines, this wine is changing very quickly since we first tasted it. I'm getting a lot more of those tobacco, those dried leaf notes to it versus the fruit flavors that I was getting a little bit more, which makes me think that, with the high alcohol level, chemical reactions are happening fast. It probably doesn't help that I have really hot lights in the studio, too. My wine's pretty warm. So this is pretty much our tasting. I want you to think about, hopefully you took some great notes today, and if you have some questions for me about these wines and what's going on, I'd love to answer them. So now is your chance to ask your questions. Yeah, this wine really does have a lot. Yeah, that strawberry balsamic was a great call. Whoever called that out. I think us as a team come up with the best tasting notes together. This is awesome. Thank you, Mike C., for coming. When's the next tasting? Well, if we had a good time, we had a pretty good time. We might be doing more of these tastings more frequently. I could see maybe getting some good wines in here and open them up sort of casually, so everyone will have a chance to taste, to try a crazy wine if I get one in. If you have, if I would love to also take this opportunity to say, if you have any ideas, if we didn't do something for you that you wanted, if you have questions you still need answered, I would love to know for future tastings if we do them. So if you're wanting to know, maybe I should be doing a special thing just on oak, and we want to taste some wines with different levels of oak or something like that, definitely let me know. Okay. This is a great question. David, awesome question. Best way to develop both your nose and taste palate? The best way to develop your nose and taste palate is it's challenging because you can't do it with just wine. You need to start integrating these practices in every single dish of the day. So if that means you're smelling, your milk in the morning in your cereal, or going to the grocery store and sniffing fruit, this is the best way to train your palate. Every single time you are about to put something in your mouth, make sure that you smell it first. And when you taste that food, really think about what it is you're tasting. You'll suddenly start to notice, you'll be able to pick out spices in your food, like, oh my God, they use cumin. And another great way to do this, and maybe we'll do a tasting on this, is taste raw ingredients. Get some cumin seeds. Taste what those taste like. Get some allspice. I talk about allspice flavors in wine. What is allspice? Go smell it. Go taste it. Go lick some nutmeg. Get yourself in front of some lemons, and just put your nose in there and really feel it out. Taste grapefruit pith. If you've never had a black currant, find one and try one. Black currants are not sweet. I have another great question from Karen C. Why do Zinfandels always have high alcohol? For the most part, yes. A Zinfandel is a warm climate grape. It tends to produce very, very sweet fruit. And the higher the sweetness and the sugar is in the fruit, the higher the potential alcohol will be in the wine. So if you have a wine growing in a hot climate making super duper fruit, you're going to have a higher alcohol wine. If you have a cool climate grape, such as Albarino tends to grow in cooler valleys in the Rías Baixas region of Spain, it might produce a less sweet fruit, thus a lower alcohol wine. Riesling, another example. Oh yeah, medium plus. All right, we have a question about acidity, tannin, or the levels of tannin and acidity in things. If you can go back to, I want to show you where I'm getting these sort of talk about acidity and tannin and how that works. And we'll take a look with the cam in a part of the book that will sort of explain this. Let me just find this page. All right. In the first part of the book, basic wine characteristics here, we sort of talk about acidity here. And if you can see here, a lemon being 2, a pH of 2, which is a very high acidity, and yogurt being a pH of 4.5, which is pretty low acidity for wine. What I do for the scale, if you can see here, each dot represents sort of a level. The lowest, the top of this, so let's just go to acidity here. The top of this is going to be a low acidity. And then high, very, very sour, high acidity is going to be 5 marks. So the middle is going to be medium. Medium minus is going to be this second dot. Medium plus is going to be right before the highest. So it's sort of a 5-mark scale. And this scale I did not invent. This scale was created by sommeliers to teach sommeliers in WSET and in Court of Masters sommeliers as a way to sort of identify and qualify these basic wine characteristics in wine. And that's what this section of the book is all about. We talk about sweetness from bone dry, like the Albarino we had, to very sweet, which might be something like port, to alcohol level being low, being below 10%. And if you see here, medium alcohol wine is between 11.5 and 13.5%. So this is pretty accurate for what professionals use. And you'll actually find a lot of American wines tend to be in the medium plus to high alcohol area. And that's because we produce the majority of American wines in California. And California is very, very hot. Very, very hot. All right, I'm going to check, see if we have any last questions before logging off. I'm glad you liked the tastings. Thanks so much. Thank you so much for coming and joining us. It was a blast. It was super awesome. I think we will do more tastings in the future. I'll keep you all tuned in. If you want to know about the next one, definitely follow us on Facebook. If you haven't subscribed already online. If you just go to our website, go to the blog roll, halfway down the page there's a little subscribe here. Just throw your email in there, and you'll find out about the tastings. And all right, I have one last question. All right, Karen, I'll answer that one. Does wine glass shape matter? We talk about this a little bit in the book, and I would say yes, it does to a point. It doesn't, as long as you have enough space to collect aromas in your glass. That's what really matters. If you want to get into the details of it, yes, a spicier wine will tend to do better in a more turbino-shaped glass, whereas a smoother wine, like a Big Malbec or maybe a California Merlot or something, will do better in this kind of shaped glass where you have a lot more room to collect aromas. You have a lot more space, so your mouth space is a little bit wider. The spicier wines need a little less space on your mouth. I mean, half of the experience of your glass is actually the shape that it makes when it touches your lips, which is really fascinating. So that's why, people who buy very expensive glasses get really excited about the rim being so thin, is because it's barely there. They get to only experience the wine. So glass shape can matter to a point. But I think as long as you're experiencing a tasting in the same glass every time and learning with the same glass every time, you're likely to have a better experience, a more consistent experience. And I would say, again, you want something that definitely can collect aromas. All right, thanks so much for joining us tonight. And we'll do this again.